Knowledge for Men, episode 74.
Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it.
Hey guys, one of the questions I've been getting a lot lately is, can you put together a list of the best books and success quotes from all of your guests and combine that into one guide? And so I've actually just done that. It's called the top 30 books and success quotes every man must live by. So out of all of the podcast episodes I've done, over 60, I finally put together this guide, and you can download it for free at kfmfree.com. Again, that's kfmfree.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Stephen McGhee. He's a top business leadership consultant, author, speaker, and documentary filmmaker. For the past 18 years, he's been leading senior-level executives to go beyond self-imposed limitations to create astonishing results in their personal and professional lives. His work brings extraordinary outcomes to seemingly unsolvable scenarios. So he works with CEOs, CFOs, politicians, celebrities, world-class athletes to help them realize their full potential and live the life of their dreams. He's the author of Learning to Believe the Unbelievable, Climb to Freedom, and Get Real. Stephen, I'm honored to have you on the show.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be with you. I've been listening to your podcast and your guests off and on for a number of months, so I feel honored to be here today.
All right. Love hearing that music to my ears. And Stephen, we always start off the show with a favorite success quote of the guest, something that they've lived by that's helped them overcome the challenges that you're about to share with us. So what do you got for us? And if you can explain why.
Well, sure. And the quote that really is integrated into my life is a quote by Joseph Campbell. And it's the quote where he said, "We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us." And as I breathe that quote in almost every day, Andrew, I find that what it means for me is simply that if anybody's going to get in the way of my life that's waiting for me, it's going to be me. In other words, it isn't going to be somebody saying no to me or some obstacle in my path economically. It's going to be something that my plan, the plan that I have for my life might be great, but sometimes I've got to let go of my plan to go for the true and extraordinary life that's waiting for me. So that's what that quote means for me.
And I just finished up the book, The Alchemist, not too long ago by Paulo Coelho, and it really closely resembles what you're saying about walking through uncertainty, embracing risk, and accepting the unknown.
Absolutely, and that's a fabulous book, and that resonates with me, what you're saying, for sure.
All right, and that quote gives us a glimpse of who you are, but let's learn more. Let's dive deeper and go into your story of how you got started with what you do.
Well, everybody's got a story, right, Andrew? And it's like, for me, it was very humble beginnings. I mean, I was essentially reared by a single parent, my mother, which is a longer story than we have time for today, but from that humble beginnings, I really had some beliefs about life and leadership and business that weren't exactly optimal. And so as I ventured into my life, I took a trajectory of life that was one of learning and growth. And thank goodness I did, because that path of learning and growth was something that helped me to peel away some of the beliefs or the limitations that I had about being a human being, that I had about being a man, that I had about true potential, not only financially, but just in terms of who I would be in the world as a leader. And so, in a way, having those humble beginnings and having to become more self-referential was a true blessing for me. So that's sort of the overarching simplicity of where I came from. Certainly, there's been a lot of changes since then, but that's how it all began.
And you took on this path of growth and learning at a younger age. I'm wondering if you had a specific light bulb moment in your past where it kind of led you down this path.
Well, for me, there was, I can remember, a lot of my buddies were going to play Little League football, and we truly, we were making ends meet. I mean, my mother was making a living for 4 kids on a waitress's salary. And that's not like, oh, poor me. It was really like, gosh, what am I going to do? So I started to realize that I could create things, and one of the first jobs I had was really as a paper boy, and I started to learn things about detail about what it made a difference to put the paper on the porch, that small things mattered. But long story short, I wanted to play football really bad. I was very physical. I had athletic potential, but I didn't get to play Little League because we didn't have the money for the helmet and the pads and that sort of thing. But fast forward to the first day at the level of junior high school where the school sponsored the pads. And I don't know if you played football or not, Andrew, but anyone out there listening played any sport at all where you'd set up like a tackle drill. So on one side, there was a guy that was running at an angle with the ball, and on the other side was a line of guys that were being taught how to make a tackle. And I remember all this fear in me, like, these guys have been playing Little League forever. I've never had a helmet on in my whole life, and I was scared. I was like, am I going to measure up? Well, anyway, the coach blew the whistle, the guy took off running with the ball, and I took off with all that fear. And Andrew, I literally pummeled the guy so hard that his helmet flew off. And that was an aha moment for me. It was like, you know what? Even though I haven't had some of the things some of these other guys have had along the way, I'm made of good stuff. And I sort of took that aha moment as a young adult and just applied it to just about anything I ever did from there. And of course, it got more sophisticated in terms of learning, but that was where it all began.
What's funny is I know the exact football drill that you're talking about in Little League. So as you're saying it, I'm like, I remember that.
Yeah. It's amazing we all lived through those drills, right?
Yeah, we certainly did. And what I like about what you just shared was that you took responsibility for your own life. And I like this quote that you said, I'm made of good stuff. It's like you realize, I'm made of good stuff. And you may not have had the same upbringing as others, but you're still very capable.
Absolutely. And I can't remember where I heard it on your podcast, Andrew, but there's that, I am a champion. Is that how it goes? I mean, it's a fabulous affirmation. And when I listened to it last time, the truth is everyone listening here, regardless of obstacles and circumstances, you're made of good stuff. It's getting it out into life. It's getting it out into business. So I am a champion, and so are you. And that's a really valuable aha moment for anybody listening.
Yeah, that song I played at the end of episode 50, which was like a celebratory episode since I made it to episode 50, and that song came from a coach who gave a speech to his high school football team. And going back to your story,
yeah.
I want to touch more on like what happened after school and post college, and kind of the story of how you fell into, coaching high level CEOs and CFOs and becoming a consultant.
Well, so most of us, I was looking out in the world, well, what do I want to do? And one of the things, because we grew up with such humble beginnings financially, I was committed to make money. And I looked out in the world and I go, where can I do that? And what was obvious was to become an expert in the financial arena. And so I got my undergraduate degree in finance. I immediately went out of, my 4-year college degree into a commercial banking situation that I was being prepped for an investment banking opportunity. I was actually on the succession plan for CEO for a very large Fortune 50 bank. And things looked really good, but the truth is there was something inside of me that was like, this isn't quite for me. I mean, I was learning a lot about money, and I remember applying myself with a lot of discipline and commitment. So there's no part of me that denies that was incredible, because I learned a lot about marginal contribution to the bottom line. I learned about investments. I learned how powerful of a resource that money is, but I also had some angst in me, Andrew. I felt like, like I was, a tiger among sheep or something. Like I didn't quite fit. Like I wasn't willing to line up quite the way that the industry of banking wanted me to line up. Like I was wearing, a blue suit and a white shirt and a red tie every day, and I kept my hair a certain way, and it just didn't feel completely aligned for me. And I also started to notice that there were issues, from my view, at the time in that particular industry that were not of the highest integrity. So I started to really study leadership. I read everything, like lots of your listeners, like you, Andrew. I read everything I could get my hands on around personal development, personal growth, spirituality, leadership. I read the classics, and I started to see that when I applied leadership, it made a difference. So I started teaching it at the bank as a way to follow my bliss. And you've heard many authors, especially Joseph Campbell, talk about following your bliss and what happens when there's this enthusiasm about life, this inspiration, or what I call being inspired by the moment, in spirit of a moment. And I started to follow my own leadership, and I started applying it at the bank. And it worked so well in terms of changing the trajectory of an objective or changing the trajectory of the culture of the bank that I just started to go, wow, I'm good at this. It was a more sophisticated aha moment than the football knocking the guy's helmet off moment, but it was like, I belong doing, this is what I'm meant to do, is to teach leadership, to not only teach it, but to be a leader and to express myself in business as a leader and to watch the influence that it had. Not like it was my idea all the time, but there was this collaborative effort where people would respond to true communication, to true listening, to the highest forms of integrity. And so that's a little bit more about how I moved from college through banking into the profession that I've now done. I think my bio said 18 years, but it's actually just over 20 years now.
Wow. And I'm wondering, what did that feel like for you? What was that moment like when you were walking in and you're going to go teach leadership for the first time? And this was really when you started to blur the line between work and play.
Well, it's a combination of complete enthusiasm and also being uncomfortable, because it's out of the box. As leaders, we're always stretching ourselves. We're always looking at our edge. We're always going outside of our comfort circle, because we realize deep down in ourselves, in the deepest part of who we are as men, we realize that outside of my comfort is where the frickin' growth is. And so it was uncomfortable for me because, I was, like I said, I was on this succession plan for CEO, and that was probably going to be like 20 years out. But they start you early. And they were teaching me leadership. They were teaching me negotiation. But what they didn't like at times, at least at this particular bank, was that I was kind of bucking the management system a little bit. I was being a little bit more rogue. And I think that that's part of our job as leaders, is to push the edge, to be progressive. So there was a blend of enthusiasm and being uncomfortable and just dealing with it as I went down that road.
Huh. And what was that experience like when you made the leap from the bank and into coaching on your own? I mean, you have achieved what many would consider the American dream. You're on a plan to become a CEO at a Fortune 50 bank.
Well, you can imagine a metaphor that I often use when I describe that feeling for my clients or when I think of it myself, is that of a trapeze artist. You're standing on one side of the abyss and you're holding on to this trapeze bar, and you're safe because you're on a platform. But eventually, inevitably, I have to jump off of my safety platform and swing out. And then what's interesting is there's a gap from one bar to the next as I transition. And the feeling that you're asking me about, it's that feeling of, man, I got to let go of this bar to get the next one. So it's different for everyone, and it was different for me given different circumstances. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's totally exhilarating. But the realization is one of, oh my gosh, if I hang on to this old bar, I'm going to swing back, and I'm going to be stuck in the same place I've been in for years, which is, not extraordinary. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, and I wouldn't knock anyone that's doing that for them as their life, but no, it's a choice. And the choice to swing out, to transition, to let go, to generate, to move from ordinary to extraordinary will absolutely be juicy. It will be exhilarating. And there's going to be some times in there where you're like, crap, what the hell did I do? I just left a company car, an American Express expense account, a great pay-for-performance program, and as long as I keep my head straight, the opportunity or the possibility of senior leadership. So letting all that go to follow one's dream, to follow my dream, was fantastic. It was the litmus test for life for me. It was like, wow, scary but true. It was true integrity for me to do that.
I like that. I can feel the hero's journey through the mic here. It's coming through. So now you're coaching high-level executives and athletes. So these are people who are probably considered masters of their craft. So I'm wondering, how do you coach someone who's already a master?
Well, this is a great question, because clearly somebody that's that successful, or someone that's been on a success path for a number of years, or someone that has a tremendous amount of knowledge, what I find that there's a couple things that come into play. Number one is that person, is that client of mine, or is that individual applying the knowledge that they have? And not to wax too philosophical, Andrew, but there's a real difference between translated knowledge and transformed knowledge. Translated knowledge being, it's book smart. I've read this 1,000 times. I know this quote. I know what I need to do, but it's translated. Transformed, it comes from wisdom. It comes from, I've actually done this. I've actually gone from point A to point B. I've actually done the trapeze act. I've let go a number of times. And there's transformation or evolution in that for leadership. But the more direct point to your question is it's in subtlety. See, it's like at that point, very small shifts in leadership offer exponential results. And maybe lots of your listeners can relate, because there's many of us that are doing all the right things, and it's like it's really going to boil down to that one or two little things that will make the exponential difference. It's like you keep priming the pump, nothing's happening. You keep priming the pump, still nothing's happening. And then suddenly there's something you shift in the subtlety of who you're being as a leader, as a person, and everything opens up. It's like the world now becomes kind of a whole different experience, a really positive one. So one of the things I'll say to someone that I'm working with that's super smart and super successful is small things that are done consistently in strategic places create major impact. And that's what most of those people want. Another point to make is it's like, let's look at, I'm from Denver, right? So I got to bring on the Broncos and Peyton Manning. So,
oh, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. So it's like, what a bummer for us in Denver to watch what happened to my Broncos and certainly to Peyton Manning during the Super Bowl. But what we don't know, as great as he is what he went through emotionally having had that experience. And my guess as a leadership guide is there's probably some deep judgment at a deep layer for him that could be released through a conversation with someone like me. It's not that he can't do it on his own. He's probably very adept at that. But the point being, even someone at that level of mastery is going to be working in areas of subtlety to go to the next level, or come back to another season, or start a new business, or write another New York Times best-selling book, or create another movie, and to mention like a Spielberg. Like, how does someone like that go from a failure to another success? It's all inside of subtlety, at least in my view.
I like that. So it's the subtle shifts. It's nothing huge, but it's something small that can have huge shifts and huge results in your business and your personal life. I like that. And I just want to point out something that you mentioned earlier, but the translated knowledge versus the transformative knowledge. And I think this is really applicable to my audience and the listeners right now. I mean, I release 2 episodes, 40-minute, sometimes hour-plus episodes a week. That's a lot of content, and it's a lot of information overload, if you will. And so what I've told my audience and listeners is that if you haven't experienced any change and you listen to all the episodes, very up to date with all the episodes, and I actually tell my listeners, and even right now, just stop listening. Go take some action. Go do what you need to do so that you can start getting results. So you can take that, what you're saying, translated knowledge, and turn that into transformative knowledge. So my question for you to help some of the listeners is, how do you make that shift from what you already know, unpack that knowledge, and turn that into real life results?
Well, again, and I have, by the way, heard you say that, and I think that's valuable wisdom for any of us that are on this path of growth. So, yeah, to your point, theory is useless. And so what is it that keeps a person from taking action? Typically, they're going to say fear. So again, I go back to this idea that small things done consistently, it's that little thing. So if you hear something, let's say it's in this podcast that resonates with you and you go, wow, as a listener, that's something I'm going to apply. Don't wait, and go and do it now and breathe it in, like get it integrated into your body, mind, heart, and soul. See, I think that's the thing. Like even some people, I even know some people, they're massive action takers, Andrew, but they're not getting it transformed because it's just like from their head, which there's nothing wrong with because you're still taking the action. But imagine when we talk about leadership, we're talking about being, who you're being as a man, who you're being as a person, who you're being as a leader. And beingness is an integration of all of it. So the problem, I think, today with a lot of people is they're taking action mentally, intellectually. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not knocking it. I'm saying, but get that into the fleshy tables of your heart. Breathe it in. And pause for a moment and realize what you've done. I am a champion. Aha moment. It'll help transform it into wisdom. Does that make any sense at all, Andrew?
You're on a roll here, so keep going.
Well, that's just it. Some of us are action machines. Some of us aren't, and if that's the case, then I encourage you to take action. The sole determinant to performance is always going to be action. But for those of us that are interested in evolving in terms of consciousness of leadership, you've got to take it to another level. You've got to be willing to get it into your bones, so to speak. So feel it. Don't be afraid of it. In my work, I teach physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of leadership. And a lot of personal growth work can be either emotional or mental. So the physical component's important because it's a way as you're moving, if you're out, let's say you're a runner, you could be thinking about what your accomplishments are. That helps to get it into your bones. Emotionally accept it. Mentally you incant it or affirm it. And spiritually, whatever your beliefs are there, just breathe it in. Ask for the Spirit to assist you in it, or the universe or nature or God, whatever you call it. But you've got to hit it on all those levels to evolve, Andrew. But it's like what I understand about your listeners is all of you out there listening, you are excited about a really extraordinary life. And I'm going to say it's worth it. It's worth the extra step. And that's what I'm saying about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, because you can hit it on one level. Great. There's nothing wrong with it. You'll be translating information. But integrating it in all these levels turns you into a more conscious being or leader.
There's this book that I'm reading, which really goes along with kind of your message here. It's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it basically says it's the small daily task that you do consistently over time that builds to your success. And this could be personally, professionally, spiritually. And that's what I'm getting from this interview, is that it's these small, subtle things done over time that really give you the results that you're looking for. The big results come from small actions over time.
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast have a lot of the broad strokes down. So I go, what else is there? Well, there's a lot more, and it's in subtlety. And it becomes a fun game. Like, this becomes a very interesting challenge to start to notice the subtle things. And it gives us an edge as leaders. It gives us that not necessarily competitive, but collaborative edge, because you'll start seeking out people that are into subtlety, and you'll find conversations with people where you can, you and I, Andrew, had one conversation a month or so ago where I was like, wow, I really am digging and understanding what you're saying, because you're into the subtlety, and your podcast, the guests you have are into the subtlety, but you've got to take it to that next level and really integrate it.
There's a ton of value going on in this episode, and I now want to shift into this experience that you had where you led a group of men into the highest mountain in the Western and Southern Hemisphere, which was 23,000 feet up in the summit of Aconcagua, and you actually filmed this experience, which is now a documentary film. And some of the common themes of the film was the power of being in a group of men. There's no limit to what one man can do. Growing stronger with every step into the unknown. And I felt that the climb was an analogy of overcoming the battle inside of one's mind. So, Stephen, can you go ahead and share with us more about this journey that you took on?
Sure. It was so cool. So as a leadership consultant, I'm always looking at how can I take myself and my clients to a new edge. So I created a 1-year program, and I'm always doing those. I've got one I'm launching later this summer. But I'm always thinking of how can I do what I just talked about? How can I assist people in experiencing this so it's not just theory? And so I created this 1-year program. I found 6 men who I had great respect for. Them. 4 of those 6 had been prior clients of mine, very successful guys. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this program where we're going to work together for 9 months before we go on the mountain. We're going to train on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of leadership. We're going to apply our learnings back to business, back to the relationships with your women, back to life. And then we're going to culminate this entire project with the attempted summit of the highest mountain in that hemisphere, called Aconcagua, 23,000-foot mountain. Now, the cool thing is, none of these guys, including me, were mountaineers, really. I mean, one guy had been up Rainier. One guy was an actor from L.A. who had recently changed business, moved to Aspen, Colorado, a good friend of mine. But he had never climbed 14,000 feet. So I actually talked to him, Andrew, about the program while he summited his first 14,000-foot peak in Colorado. And I'm like, dude, how would you like to do a lot more of this in the next year? And the the price for this was high. I mean, there was a pretty substantial investment of dollars, but commitment of time, being away from family. We worked out together as a team 2 to 3 times a week for 9 months. We went down on that mountain. I had hired the best guide company on the mountain. One of the guides was a world record holder for speed ascents on Everest and Aconcagua. And another guy, a dear friend of mine, was a guide up in Vail, but also 12 successful summits of Aconcagua. So we were surrounded by good technology and know-how. And it turns out that the film is not as much about climbing, even though the climbing scenes are amazing. I mean, we experienced watching people die on our summit day. On one of our training climbs, there was a man who died, and we watched his body being extracted from the mountain. So this was a real kick-butt, but a very intense year for us. And once we got off of the mountain, we came back and really talked a lot as a team about, my goodness, what did we learn? How did we move our learning from translation to transformation? And what's going to be different about you guys? So I filmed the whole thing, Andrew. It's an amazing story. I won't say more about it because I think at the end of your podcast we're going to offer the film to people to watch it for free. But it's an amazing film, and I'll tell you, I wasn't a filmmaker. I had some good help and some great editing, but I did the summit scenes on Aconcagua. I won't tell you more about who summited and who didn't because we didn't all make the summit, but I did it with a GoPro, and it was pretty cool how we used that technology to get some scenes in the tent, to get some real emotional scenes of guys when they were literally transforming their lives on a 23,000-foot mountain. So it was a great project, and I'm really grateful we did it.
Just the events that were captured on that summit was very moving. So I'm very grateful that you're going to offer this to my community for free. So more details on that after the knowledge round. So speaking of knowledge round, Stephen, are you ready to embark on the knowledge round?
I think so. I'm ready to go for it.
Do you ever have so many books to read that you end up not reading at all? You have so many books in your library, on your list of books that you want to read, but you don't know which books to tackle first? I know in all of my episodes, I ask guests, what are your favorite books? What are your most influential books? And they always list 3 or 4. And I always ask guests for their favorite success quote. I find that quotes can be so powerful sometimes, yet there's so many available. So what I've done is I put together a list of the top 30 books and top 30 success quotes that I think every man must live by. And these are directly from guests on the Knowledge for Men podcast. And as you know, some of the guests on my show sold their companies for millions of dollars. They're running billion-dollar organizations. They're dating coaches. They're health coaches. They're entrepreneurs. They're celebrities on TV. They're mixed martial artists. Just this wide variety of great minds. And I put together a list of the top 30 books and top 30 success quotes that every man must live by. You can download this guide for free at kfmfree.com. Again, that's kfmfree.com.
Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
All right, and Stephen, how would you explain leadership to a newcomer, someone who's just starting out in a leadership role?
Wow. Leadership is how one person can positively influence another person or situation. It's positive influence is what leadership is as an overarching definition.
And Stephen, are leaders born or are they made?
Both. I get that question all the time. I think some people are more naturally gifted as leaders, and those of us that aren't, it's like it can be learned. You can learn to communicate more clearly. A person can learn to hone their, what I call soft skills, like listening, I think is a very valuable attribute of great leaders moving into the future. And so a person can learn that. A person can live in his or her integrity. Some natural born leaders are not always living in their integrity. So I think it's a combination of both, what we have as personal attributes coming into life, but I think all of those personal attributes can be grown. I'm a big believer in positive change for everyone.
I like that. And Stephen, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling lost or unsure of their purpose in life?
Well, it's going to sound odd, but a great question. You're so good at questions. I'm stalling because I'm thinking, Andrew, but I think the answer that I would give you would be, it's going to sound odd, but slow down. You go, well, what do you mean slow down? I'm feeling stuck. I don't want to be any more stuck. Why would I slow down? I want you to slow down because I want you to get in touch with the deepest part of who you are, because there's nothing but good there. It's like the story of the golden Buddha. Peel off the stickiness, peel off the judgments, peel off the worry, peel off the doubt, peel off the disappointment, peel off the fact that you made mistakes and you had failures. So what? Use those things for your advancement, and you will not be stuck any longer, I promise you that.
It's always good to hear something new. And the golden Buddha analogy, I like that. Just peel it off, because beneath all that, the layers of dirt and wounds and bad experiences in your life is a golden statue that's waiting to shine. And now, Stephen, was there anything that was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Well, there's a question that I ask myself from time to time, and at first glance it doesn't sound so positive, but it really is. And it's, how long am I going to prolong the inevitable nature of my own brilliance? Like, how long am I going to prolong the inevitable? Like, I know what to do, and I'm just avoiding it. So when I think back over my life, it's like, what was I waiting for? It's all turned out fine. Process is overrated. I'm a big believer in immediacy. So I would say that's what was holding me back, was some kind of process that people said, well, you got to wait till you have this, or you got to wait till you have that. It's like, that's a bunch of BS. It's not accurate. You can do what you can do now through immediacy and owning, on these levels we've talked about, owning who it is that you are and putting your brilliance out in the world. And don't be afraid to. The world needs your brilliance. The world needs your greatness. The world needs your courage. So that's how I would answer that.
All right. And Stephen, can you name a mentor or someone who's had a large impact on your life, something that someone told you and really touched you? What did he or she say?
Early in the podcast, I mentioned my mom reared us as single parent. So it might be shocking. I go, it's my dad. And because my dad was out of my life for almost 34 years, he was my greatest mentor, and here's why. Because at first, I was committed to not being my dad. I was committed to doing everything different than he did. Because at that time I thought, gosh, he's such a loser. I mean, 4 kids, he's gone, where is he? All this stuff that I had as self-doubt. And fast forward, though, to my life now, where I came back into contact with my dad 10 years ago. And he's an amazing human being. He turned his entire life around. He told me in our first meeting after 34 years, he said, Stephen, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't pray for you and your brothers and sister. And he's a mentor to me because of who he became. So Andrew, it isn't that he said any one thing to me necessarily, but it was who he is today is truly an amazing human being, and I'm grateful he's my dad.
Wow, man, this is not something I was expecting, so I really appreciate the vulnerability you're showing my audience here.
Yeah, thank you.
And Stephen, I think this will be a tough question for you, but what are your 3 most influential books and why?
It is a tough question for me because I've read so much. And so let me just start by saying I've read all the classics, and so is most everyone that's listened. But aside from those, I said Reinventing Yourself by Steve Chandler. And it's because if there's anyone out there listening that has any victim left in you, get this book and read it, and you won't have any victim left after you read the book. It's a fabulous read on owning your life, and Steve Chandler's a dear friend of mine, he's written, 35, 36 books. He's a prolific writer, and he writes from a place of, it's really interesting, and I get involved in his reading. Simple but powerful. I love The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and I love it because it's more of the spiritual side. There's one quote in the book that says, when you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And that's why I love that book, because it sort of appeals to the spiritual side of me as a leader. And then lastly, a book called A Way of Being by Carl Rogers, who's the founder of what's called Rogerian theory. And Carl Rogers is pretty well known in the coaching and leadership circles, but not the general public. But he teaches us a lot about if you decide today you're going to be a different person, there's no process to that. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Andrew, I don't know if you know this story, but he was getting autographs from people way before he was famous. And whether you like Arnold or don't like Arnold isn't my point. My point is, he was being famous before he was famous, which made him famous. And Carl Rogers writes a lot about that.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of my unofficial mentors. He just doesn't know it yet. I'm actually reading his book Total Recall right now, and it's really good.
Cool.
And this next question here, probably going to leave you a little flustered. One of my favorite questions. And so if you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
I would say what to do would be, I would say get in the game now. Don't wait. I would say don't be afraid to fail. So that's a combination of what to do and what not to do in a way. Like don't wait, get in the game now. There's no need for you to go through some long drawn-out process before you claim who you are. The world's waiting. Life is waiting. Back to my quote, the life that is waiting for us is now, including when I was 20, when you're 20.
So it doesn't take decades to discover yourself?
No, I think I'm in my early 50s, and I'm always going to be learning. Listen, that's my primary function, is I'm always going to be learning. So the learning never stops. But what I'm talking about is applying that and claiming it now, like not waiting until you have permission from the world to be great. Give yourself permission to be great. And even a 20-year-old can be great. We've seen 20-year-olds that are great. I'm inspired by 20-year-olds that are like rocking it out there, doing their sport or doing their music or doing their business. I mean, I've learned a ton from 20-year-olds and how they go for it.
All right, and on to the next question here. What's one underrated characteristic that you believe every person should work on, and if they did, they would see massive results in their life?
Well, I alluded to it earlier. So listening, becoming a better listener, not only for content, Andrew, but when you're sitting with another human being and you really listen to who they are, be blown away. And the conversation, it's what in my work I call a level 10 conversation, because people come to me and go, well, I had a sales call and didn't go so well. I go, on a scale from 1 to 10, what level was the conversation at? They go, what do you mean? That's weird. I go, no, it's not weird. Give me a number. They say, it's 5. I go back and have a level 10 conversation. They go, how? I go, listen. So they go back and they listen. And they come back and go, wow, that was miraculous. That was incredible. We connected so much better. He hired me. He bought my goods. So listening is the skill or the attribute that I say all of us could practice more of.
Listening. It sounds just so simple, but sometimes the simple things are the most effective things. And now, Stephen, you've accomplished so much in your career and written books, climbed summits, and made a documentary film. And, what would you can feel free to allude to some of the things you've talked about previously, but what's your philosophy on life and success?
Well, my philosophy on life is that life is a game to be played. And for those of us that have played games out there, which I suspect is almost everyone of some kind or another, you're going to sometimes get tackled. Sometimes you're going to score. Sometimes you're going to be in the huddle and you're going to be tired. But we're still playing a game, and all of it's good. There's no element in the game that you'd really want to take out. If you knew that you were going to win every single game that you played for the rest of your life, like you knew it was a given, like, God came down and said, Andrew, you will never fail for the rest of your life. Everything you touch forever and ever and ever will be golden. And we might think we would like that because it's like, that sounds great. But ultimately, the learnings come from the entirety of the game. And so the philosophy I have, and that I love to play with money, I'm blessed to be in a great marriage with an amazing woman and my friends, and it just all of it to me is it's exciting every day to go, what's going to happen today in the game? I can't predict it all. And then of course when I score, I'm very happy about that. It's like, this is a victory. It's a victory for me. It's a victory for everyone I'm around. So that's my philosophy on life, and I love it. I love playing it that way.
Yeah, I like the game analogy, because in games, you take massive risk and you do wild things and you enjoy the adventure. And when you fail and when you die in the video game, you just keep playing and you just keep going. You wipe it off and it never sweats, never hurts you. Yeah. And now, Stephen, what's exciting you today? What's getting you out of bed in the morning?
Well, probably, first of all, the thing that gets me out of bed every morning is to be a part of transforming the ideas of leadership on the planet. I just think it's time for all of us to embrace who we are as leaders. And so every day I wake up, I get to be a part of that. I get to work with some of the greatest leaders on the planet. And so that's exciting to me, to watch the influence that leaders have in terms of running an organization or a business or whatever it is that they're doing. Secondly, my third book, Get Real, the subtitle, A Vital Breakthrough on Life and Leadership, is coming out this summer. I'm very excited about it. The preliminary reviews on it are excellent, and it seems to be a book that really resonates, a lot of which talked about today is in the book. And then, of course, a new program I'm launching, which comes out again this summer. It's called the Life Summit Project, which is about taking leaders into the realm of their life legacy. So it's not about the short term, but it's more like, what do you want to create as a legacy in your life? If it's 40, 50 years out, great. But what is that? Defining that and moving those individuals in that direction. So those are a few things I'm just really excited about.
Well, I'm excited for you, Stephen. You're doing all this fun stuff here.
It's fun stuff, huh?
Yeah, very fun stuff. I mean, helping someone, discover or even create their legacy, that's priceless. You're not out there. You're not selling nuts and bolts or sugar water. You're creating lasting impact on someone's life.
Yeah, no doubt. And the neat thing about how we get to do it is to our conversation today, Andrew, is I'm always looking for ways that are interesting and new to have people experience it. So this wouldn't be new to a Navy SEAL, but it might be new to some people that have never stayed up for 72 hours. So I'm going to take them out. We're going to do 72 hours of no sleep and see what comes from the inside out on that. So it's stuff that we get to do that has people go to their edge. And when a person wants to go to their edge, then when they have to go to their edge, they're prepared, is how I look at it.
And Stephen, how can the listeners get their hands on the documentary film of the climb that you did on Aconcagua? I hope I said that right.
You did. You absolutely did. And so, yeah, the documentary film Climb for Freedom can be found on Vimeo.com. And I think we can have a code for the listeners, Andrew, that they'll be able to download that for free. So I'll make sure that I get that to you. The code will actually be Knowledge for Men, but what I mean is if you're having any trouble finding Climb for Freedom, we can give you a specific number on Andrew's website to get to it.
Right. So I do a blog post for all the episodes. So this will be episode 74 with Stephen McGhee. So look for that on knowledgeformen.com, episode 74, Stephen McGhee. And inside there, I'll have the URL and the code that will give you free access to this documentary. So guys, I watched this documentary. It's about just under an hour, about an hour or so. And it was very inspiring, very moving. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, you're going to love the documentary film. So Stephen, go ahead and give yourself a plug so the audience can connect with you going forward.
Yeah, well, you can find me at www.McGhee, which is spelled McGhee, leadership.com. So that's McGheeleadership.com, and love to hear from your listeners as we go down the road together. So Andrew, just really love the work you're doing and the difference you're making, man. You really are doing some good work with the guests, and I know a lot of people are impacted positively by that.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, especially coming from you. And again, thank you for your time. I know you're so busy. You're working on so many projects and making impact, in so many different places. So for you to spend, it looks like it's now been about an hour with me. I'm honored. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and that's going to wrap up episode 74 with Stephen McGhee. And hey guys, the challenge item that I had in episode 70 with Joel Brown was to quit your job and do something that you're more passionate about. Just quit whatever your job you're in. If you don't like where you're in, that's only if you don't like where you're at, and go on an adventure and try and find something that you really deeply, something that you can resonate with. And so I just want to give an update that I actually got a message from one of the listeners. His name's Fabian. Here's what he sent me. Here's the message. He says, "Took challenge item from episode 70, my man. Quit my dead-end job in San Diego and moved to Las Vegas. Got an awesome job with a great company doing things I love doing. All in a brand new city, on cloud 9 right now. Thanks for the podcast." So here's someone, I followed up with him, and I'm going to do a little call with him, and, I'll get his voice on here, but I really wanted to just show, someone listened to the challenge item, they took action, and the result was, it looks like a brand new life right here. So I'm really excited to chat up with Fabian and follow up with him on that message. But he followed the challenge item. He quit his job just based off one challenge item from listening to this podcast. He's in a brand new city and got a new job. And this has just been in a matter of weeks. So it's incredible what you can do when you just take massive action. And similarly, in this episode, he made that leap. And for Stephen to make that leap, it was, really challenging as well, where he had to quit a job where he was on a track to become CEO of a Fortune 50 bank. He wasn't really in a bad position. He just wasn't doing something that he was really passionate about, or doing something that really connected with him, where he outgrew something and wanted to challenge himself in another arena. And I'm going to continue on with this challenge, because here we've had a success story. We have several guys in different episodes now who've made some sort of leap in their life. And I'm going to continue that challenge. And that challenge is, if you're in a situation that isn't helping you or it's not serving you, then leave that situation. And that could be in work, it can be in a relationship, but to actually take the leap. And it can be the most liberating experience of all. It can completely transform the way that you live, the way that you walk, the way that you just wake up and enjoy the morning, because you can't wait to start your day. I've experienced that. I obviously, my story. I took the leap. Joel Brown took the leap in episode 70. Fabian was the guy who accepted the challenge and did it from episode 70, and I've done it. So I pass it on to you if you're listening. If you're doing something that doesn't serve you, move on. Until next time, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast show. It's been a pleasure having you be a part of a thriving community of men who want to crush it in all aspects of life. I'm on a mission here to inspire millions of guys, and with your help, we're going to make a dent in the universe. Check out knowledgeformen.com for a ton of free content that's designed to help you live a remarkable life. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com. I hope to see you there. And always remember, 2014 is the official year of the crush, where we take action to get the life we've always dreamed of. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and until next time, let's do it.